Good morning, everyone. Happy Friday. I'm Dr. Laurie Davis, and I'm kind of, if I sound low key, it's because I'm trying not to be too excited. So, this is the launch of our very special show, Voices of and for Indigenous People. So, this will be a weekly show for now, and I'm here with my colleague, Dr. Ramin Modiri, and we're going to do a little bit of a flip today. So, over to you, Dr. Ramin, to introduce yourself and let's get our show on the go here. Over to you.
All right. Thank you so much, Dr. Laurie. I'm really excited. I mean, this is something, as you know, very close to our hearts. And we've been working on the projects to really make a difference. And I'm so glad that's one of the things that we wanted to do, to have a weekly show and to have more exposure, have guests who understand the cultures of our valuable and very indigenous and for indigenous people culture. And so before we start, I'd like to just give a little background about myself.
Yes.
You're pretty well known in the communities. I'm not. I've come from Southern California, and that's where I live. So I'm coming to you from Orange County, California. But believe it or not, I was born in northwestern part of Iran, and it's called Azerbaijan. And where I was born, we were in an area that the traditions, the language, the culture, everything was very much different than the central government, or we call the Persian culture. We were Azeris, and again, the language is very different. So that's where I was born. Both my parents were teachers. And life, although the city I was born was the second largest, but everybody wanted to move to capital city because that's where the opportunities were. So at age 4, we ended up moving, me and my 1-year-old sister and my mom and dad, we moved to city of Tehran, which is the capital city of Iran. And at that time, my dad was getting better opportunities. Now here, I had to learn new language. I had to actually learn new traditions. And that's where really life became exciting, but also challenging because you're an outsider. And, when you are in a very uh, urban area and, people are, it's almost going to New York City. And at that time, Iran was really growing. It's one of the fastest growing economies in the world, and life was actually good. So at age 16, believe it or not, I got a visa to come to United States. I was accepted to high school, and I was very much excited because we, of course, in our country, we always wanted to come to United States. Some people would go to England, some people go to Germany, but the major destination was United States for the educational reasons. So I was accepted and I was so excited. So I moved to United States. Here I go again. As a teenager now, I have to go through all the language that I had learned in high school, but we did not speak, and the culture again. Um, I got my visa from Champaign, Illinois, but I ended up going to Connecticut, which is again northeastern part of the United States. And believe it or not, in high school, there was only 2 foreign students. There was me, and there was a young man from Vietnam. So even traditionally, they did not know anything about uh, people from the immigrants and coming from different cultures. It was very closed, uh, in a not in a bad way. They were nicest young people that I met. The teachers were nice, but they just didn't have the exposure. So the reason I want to share that, because of the journey I had, I've had this really appreciation of different cultures. As a matter of fact, when I started my career in investments, portfolio management 40 years ago, my specialty was in international investing, especially emerging and developing economies. Because a lot of times when it comes to investing, we focus a lot on the numbers and, what is the price of this, what is the exports. Culture plays a huge role in actually making investment decisions. So because of that, I really have this passion for multicultures, and I've seen the challenges. I've tried to work in, let's say, African community, in the Middle Eastern communities, and then 3 years ago, 3 years and I have to say 1 month and 2 days ago, I met you, and I really appreciated what you were doing because you have approached things completely differently. So I'm a numbers person, right? So I analyze things, and although I try to be both sides of the brain, I really appreciate again the culture side. But you go to the heart of the things, and that's what really interested me to see why a lot of communities, with all the talents sometimes that they have, they do not strive, they do not succeed. And it all goes back to, which is your specialty, that self-value, self-worth, self-understanding. And and the rest is history. We've been together, and we've been really have had this common heart and common goal to helping the communities that they needed the most. But unfortunately, they get the least attention. Or if they get the attention, it is not the roots of the cause. It's more of a band-aid and just showing up and saying that, oh, we're there because we just showed up for 2 minutes and then they're gone. So, and that's what I think makes us different, because we want to genuinely go to the cause of things and help and uplift and bring back the dignity and honor that we always seen in these cultures. So with that in mind, I know you've done a lot of work in Indigenous community. You have a wonderful story, and I know, at least based on my knowledge, you've been working with them for 26 years. So you have a wonderful history and understanding of what's happening, but you've been in the middle of it. So what I like to do is start with, I would love to hear, first of all, about your background, again, all the work that you've done, again, specifically in this situation with Indigenous communities and nations. So thank you.
Well, thank you for that. And I really loved hearing about the fact that culturally there are so many challenges for people. And I'll just share this with you. The one thing that I do know about our Indigenous culture, and then I'll give a little background. If all broke loose or whatever, you have a homeland, Iran. And people who have immigrated sometimes go back to their homeland, but they have a homeland to go back to in some cases, or maybe not. But the Indigenous people in our country, both in North America, they don't have a country to go back to. This is their country. This is their land. They can't go back to Italy or back to England or back to, because this is where they have been for thousands of years. So having said that, my background, I was a teacher, an educator. And interestingly enough, I decided in those early days, I'll go back even before my career. I was always that person that would bring some kid home from high school whose parents were maybe going not home from work yet, or they were divorced, or I knew they didn't have a meal coming up. So I do remember always being looking after people's needs and seeing what the needs were before they even saw it. And I remember one night at the supper table, my dad said to my mom, "Where does she find these people?" Mm-hmm. So it was only natural for me when I graduated that there were jobs available in a very marginalized community in my province. And I taught for the first 6 years in a 100% Black community. And so that was the beginning of my journey. And I had two very beautiful women take me under their wings and show me the ropes so that I could survive in that community, working there, getting there. And That was in 1970, and there were still people living in houses with dirt floors. That's how extensive the poverty was in that community. Today, it's a big, thriving, beautiful community, but it with not without its challenges. So then I love travel. So I've been to Asia. I've been in quite a few countries around the world. But I was that person, that tourist that always wanted to go down and be with the real people. So even when I was in Hong Kong, I didn't want to go on the tour trips that they had planned where they just take you to all the pretty places. I wanted to get to the heart of the matter. So I did my own touring. And that's what it was like for me when I traveled. I would always want to be in the marketplace. I'd want to be talking to the locals. So I have this incestuous, not incestuous, what is the word? That's the wrong word, but um, intense desire, I guess, to learn about other cultures. And I would read books about other cultures. I would watch TV shows that were being filmed in other countries. So I always had this universal approach to life. So in 1998, about let's see, 88, that would be about 6 years into my business. My husband and I decided we wanted to subsidize our golden years with a business. This was really all about just subsidizing our pensions. Can you
Mhm.
imagine? So, but I got a call. I had not had any Indigenous contact, I must say, until 1998. I got a phone call from the health director of the second largest reservation on the East Coast at the time, called Big Cove. And they were interested. They had gotten some funding and they wanted to do something different for sexual abuse survivors and residential school
Mhm.
survivors. And they were just kind of tired of the same old thing, the way that things get done. But they had heard about me. And I got to tell you, Ramin, the ink wasn't even dry on my first product when I got that call. So I went to the community and I did a presentation for them. And bada bing, bada boom, next thing you know, I'm working in the community. Now, my dad grew up in a community where 10 minutes down the road, there was a residential school in Shubenacadie, Nova Scotia, a big, stark brick building.
Mhm.
And we thought it was a hospital. That's how separated we were. And growing up white, we had no idea about the residential school system. It was never taught in our classes. We didn't even know that existed. So again, here was an opportunity to make a difference. And I felt that I wasn't responsible for what my ancestors did, my European ancestors, when they arrived here in North America and what took place with our First Nations people. But I've always felt responsible to be part of the solution. I can't help what they did, but I can certainly help to resolve some of the issues. So that's the connection and a little background about me and how I'm that person that'll walk up to that street person and have a conversation. I'll walk up to, a drunk well, I remember I'll just share this little story, going out with some girlfriends, and this man who was quite inebriated asked me to dance. And so I got up and danced with him. He brought me back to the table. And then all my girlfriends were nattering about, how could you get up with that drunk person and have a dance? Like, really, Laurie? Like, that's not. I said, it was just a dance. He didn't ask for a lifetime commitment. So, yeah, so I hope that helps people to understand who I am as an individual. It's not really anything more than who I always was. And even as a little girl, I always had that level of compassion. And my grandmother would take me everywhere because she said I would walk into a room and automatically make people feel better. So that's my gift.
Wonderful. Oh, thank you for that. And it's a very, very short, because you have accomplished so much. So that brings me, actually, you just mentioned about the community that you worked. I'd love to hear more about what did you do and what was the project that you did. And I know it was, as I said, it's like 26 years ago. It's been so fruitful because now we have a history to go back and say, well,
Mhm,
this is the
mhm,
results of all the efforts that you did. So,
mhm,
can you share what you actually did and
mhm.
what happened after? And
Yes. Well, the thing is, most of our reservations, people were put off the beaten track. Reservations were not right. Very few of them are on a main highway, but mostly the off the beaten track. And so a 13-kilometer drive in on a gravel road to get there. And that's not unusual. And when I took you to visit some communities, remember you asked me to stop so you could take a picture of the end of the pavement for the provincial highway and then the entrance to the reserve, which was like a washboard and potholes, and that's common. So when I went there in 26 years ago, 2,500 people live there, though it's the second largest, and we're talking about Big Cove, New Brunswick, now known by their native name, Elsipogtog. And you couldn't buy a cup of coffee in the community. People were driving 18 kilometers to our local coffee chain to get coffee. So very little infrastructure or economic development, if you will. But I would be working at the health center, which happened to be one of the most beautiful building in the community. And my first incident, because it wasn't without a lot of problems, because I did not have any previous Indigenous contact. So I went in there, green as grass, wet behind the ears, cold turkey, just like I did when I went to that Black community to teach so many years before that. And actually, from 1970 to 1998, we're talking 28 years prior to that, I'd had a very similar experience. So I wasn't shy because I knew I could learn and, a fast learner. So we went in and I did a presentation for all the professionals in the community, like the RCMP, the addictions counselors, the people who were working within the framework of the community, and describing to them what my program was like and how it ran. And it was all about empowerment, building confidence, communication skills, which is really what they were looking for because they had everything else. They had their psychologists on board, they had their professionals. So this was something new and innovative. And so I really am in gratitude forever since for that experience, because what that did, it opened up more doors. So I started working and I started off doing little groups. So I had like a single moms group and I had a men's group because in our work, we don't put more than 6 people in a workshop. So I had an elders group and I have a picture of my elder here. So I had these little pockets of groups that we built, and it was funded off reserve. It was federal money, so it wasn't really in the hands of the band, but it was within the framework. So give you a little example, because this is what can happen when you become empowered. You can become a problem. So I'm in the community. I travel up 5 hours up. I stay for 3 days, 5 hours home. So I'll never forget this little gal, single mom, and third weekend, the director of health services calls me into her office and she says, "We're in trouble already." I said, "We're in trouble?" "Yes," she said. "I have just had a call from the band office, and there's a young woman down there pounding her fists on the counter, swearing at the receptionist, and demanding that the windows in her house be replaced immediately because she's been asking for 10 years and she has just learned that she's been a victim, and I'm not going to be your victim anymore." And I went, "Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry." "Oh no," she said, "don't be sorry. That's exactly what we want to have happen. Keep up the good work." So, I have many, many stories, but I have to say, intuitively, when I put my feet on the ground in that community, I could feel the energy or electrical charge, if you will, go through my body. It was like I had come home. And I was the novice, but I wanted to learn. So one of the women who supported me in that, just like the two beautiful Black teachers who supported me 28 years prior to that, stepped up and started coming to our workshops. And here she is.
Um,
And her name was Lillian Francis. She's deceased now, but she was an elder in the community. And this happens to be my sister's daughter, Meredith. And at the time, Meredith was in my children's program at home, but I took her with me on a trip because I wanted her to meet Lillian. And at the time, she was my youngest client, and Lillian was my eldest. So that was a beautiful poster. I would love to have a big poster made out of that. So Lillian, I went to her and I said, Lillian, would you mentor me on how to become a Mi'kmaq warrior woman like you? And she said, I would love to do that. Now, in this community, they had never lost their language per se. So English was a second language for many of them. And so there was this thicker accent that went with their speech. And Lillian was one of those people. So I love telling her story because she not only supported me, that's when I changed a lot of my core beliefs about who I was and why I was here. And like you, I transitioned from one culture to another. So that's how I practice my spirituality. That's how I operate my life, the virtues, the medicine wheel. I embraced all of that. And I actually became a Mi'kmaq woman in my heart, not in my skin or my color, but that's where I operate from. And I have done so for the past 26 years. I have another interesting story about that because I did travel to Taiwan as well and took my picture and shared my story of Lillian. And I had a translator. And when I shared stories of the heart, they didn't need the translation. It was only when I shared technical stuff that they needed the translator. So that's how connected we all really are. And of course, with church and government and languages, and there have been many boundaries and divisions created to keep us all separated, like 13 kilometers off the main drag. But I do have a story I want to share because you see, then I started building ambassadors within the community. Lillian became an ambassador and she started to see the changes in herself. And I said to her one day, I said, Lillian, you're 82. Are you really going to make a change? And she said, probably not. But Laurie, today I teach you what is an elder. I said, okay, because you see, I was the student. I became the student. And just like you've become the student, you want to know more and more and more. And the more you learn about the culture, the more you want to be involved. And I don't know that our Indigenous people understand that there are people out there who have a heart for them, even though we're not First Nations people. We weren't born First Nations people. So I said to Lillian, so why are you here? And she said, well, every Wednesday I go home and I make 2 pans of cookies. And I put my grandchildren, all 14 of them, in front of me. They have an appointment. I get a big gallon of milk. And while they're eating their cookies and drinking their milk, I teach them what I learn in your workshops.
Oh,
Because I told them, if you want a different life, a happier life, you must be open to new information. We can't keep doing, and Lillian was saying these things 26 years ago. We can't keep doing things the same old way. We need new enlightenment, new information, new ways of doing things. And Laurie, that is what your workshops are all about. So you can see how rapidly I became in love with the culture and the people. And the next thing I know, I'm driving around the community. Ron and I are together. He's driving, and we're checking out the community. And we found this little house with some antenna coming out. And I said, wow, I think they have a radio station here. And they did. So that's another little story I'll share, because that's another vehicle that I used to get into the community and become part of the community, because we both know the media is really powerful. So I got out of the car. I walked up. I'm about to meet my next ambassador. I walk up to the door, and this tinier man came to the door, and I said, I'm Laurie Davis. Do you have a radio station here? Oh yeah. He said, I'm Foster. I own the station. I said, oh, hi. He said, I've got a TV station too in the living room. I said, what? Innovative, innovative. I said, wow. I said, well, I'm a professional broadcaster. I have a radio show in Halifax, and I'm coming up here once a week. How would you like, what do you have for programming? He says, we have music and we have bingo. And we have bingo and we have music. I went, whoa. I said, how would you like some professional broadcasting, and maybe we'll do like a talk show? People can phone in. Oh, no. No. I said, why not? He said, because it won't work. Everybody in the community, see, I'm about to learn some more things. Everybody in the community knows everybody's voice. So if they call in, someone would already know who they are. And we're not going to do that. I said, well, then how about this? How about you and I once a week, we just do a 1-hour show. You speak your language, I'll speak English, and we'll broadcast the first bilingual First Nations English show in the history of mankind. Now I have his attention. Mm-hmm. Now he's excited. So once a week, I brought my producer up from Halifax. He helped us set it up. We had duct tape wires to the wall, and we used this big old red speakerphone. And the next thing you know, we have a nice little studio in one of the back bedrooms. And we read poetry. We shared the news. Foster would do it in Mi'kmaq. I would do it in English. It was a beautiful experience. And 3 months into the show, there was a big incident. North of the community, the fisheries officers were up there confiscating lobster licenses and burning boats, and Burnt Church is the name of the community. And I said, Foster, today we have to talk about Burnt Church. And he said, no, we cannot. I said, oh yeah, we can. We have the freedom to speak about whatever we want, because he was all regulated, CRTC regulations here in Canada and everything. And I said, oh yeah, we can talk about it. So we get on the air and we're going, is there anybody in Burnt Church who's up there who would like to phone us and tell us what's going on? Bing, phone rang. And that phone light never stopped for the next hour. And people from the community, because we had a situation that touched their hearts, you see, back to the heart, they were okay with knowing if anybody knew their voice. So we were able to bypass that fear and that consciousness that doesn't allow us to do things. And the next thing you know, we have a talk show. But it took us 3 months working in the community. And I'd say things like, there's so many new babies in the community and it's a beautiful day out there. So why don't we get our kids in those strollers, and instead of sitting on the couch watching television and eating chips, why don't we go out in the fresh air and get to know the other moms? That day, when I walked out of that studio, what do you think I saw?
Oh, yeah. All these mothers.
All these moms with their little babies.
Yeah.
So I have many, many stories from there, but each step along the way was me learning more. That was my university for learning about the Indigenous people, not a conventional university out of a history book that we don't know if it's even true or not. And I actually had a Cree friend of mine say she had to go to university to learn how to be a Cree woman. Well, you see, this was my university. This woman taught me how to be a Mi'kmaq woman. And that contributed greatly to my work. And I was there for 2.5 years. I have lots of stories, but over to you if you have a question. And I see we have a comment here, so let's see what's somebody's made a comment. Oh, Jill, our colleague, wonderful stories of growth and healing, truly. Absolutely, it was my healing. And they embraced me. I have very good friends there that I can just pick up the phone right now and I could go stay there. And then they became my next ambassadors. So as I got to know people within the community, it wasn't really just about my program and me delivering the program and that I was the person who knew everything, because I didn't know anything. But the one thing I do know, and I did know, the residential school system, 125-year history of trying to assimilate our Indigenous people and turning them into white people, did not succeed. That did for a while, but it did not succeed. You see, that system in the United States, Ramin, only lasted 40 years, the Indian boarding school system. So this was about division of family, taking children away from their parents. And you're a dad, and you know what? As dysfunctional as you may be, I'm not saying you're dysfunctional, but children will not abandon their parents. It's parents who abandon their children. Okay. But in this situation, the children were actually abducted. And actually within that community, there were little caves in the community that I became curious about. And I said, there's all these little holes in the dirt, behind a house or behind the school, or, oh yes, that's where we used to hide our children. We always had somebody high up in a tree checking to see who's coming into the community. And when they would see a black car and 2 Indian agents stepping out dressed in their black suits and their white shirts and their black ties, the fear that overcame the families that they were coming to take some of the more of the children were trained and taught to hide in those caves. And that's how some kids got saved from that system. But then there were members in the communities who voluntarily sent their children because they wanted them to have a better future. So they thought if they got an education, that would make things better. But little did they know of how the kids were going to be treated in that process, or they never would have sent them. So there's like 2 sides to that, how children ended up in the schools. So what was in this for me? History lessons. The history. And I delved very heavily into the history of not just the Mi'kmaq people, but the Navajo people, the Hopi Nation, all across America. Because even though, it's like any other culture, you moved from one city to the other, the language changed. Yes, the celebrations and systems and ceremonies are different from one nation to the other. Of course they are. So you can't put everybody into one big melting pot. And in Nova Scotia, we have 5 cultures of Black people. They're not all from Africa. So you can't call them African Canadians because some came from the West Indies, some came from the Caribbean, So those are some of the things that happened. And I have my kid's story yet, but over to you just to give you a little chance to interject or connect or whatever. I'll take a little break. Over to you.
Yes, no, that's awesome. That's such a wonderful story to come to our next one, which we will talk about the youth and some of the programs you've done. And you just mentioned education, and education is very important. And especially we live in this world that is constantly moving. And when we think about the advancements we've had in past 20 years is equal to like 5,000 years altogether, and how fast it's moving. The problem we have is as important it is to be talented and educated and wealthy, you think about all these people who have that financial wealth. That word we mentioned about heart, it's your spiritual compass. It's the direction that you take with the knowledge that you get is, I believe, is even more important. So sometimes it's good to be a kind and someone who is altruistic, stupid person than to become the most talented, educated, but yet deceiving person. So, and that's what the difference is. I don't know if you ever watched movies on Netflix now, I believe, or Prime, I'm not sure, but it's, Breaking Bad. It was really big in the United States. And here's this talented chemist is making the best drugs or in the world. Seriously. And that he has all this talent and he was ruining thousands and thousands of lives. So yes, he had like 95, he made 95, $100 million. Yes, you can achieve that financial wealth, but at what cost? So
Mhm.
it's not just about the talent, it's not just about pure education, it's about the right education. And that mixture that you mentioned, uh, as far as our elders, they have a lot of wisdom, but also we need the new information. We need to know how the world works. So it has to be the best of two worlds. And that's what is missing. It's almost become like black and white or either or either this is the best or you have to do this by traditions, otherwise you will not be accepted, or no, this is all scientific and we have to do it this way. One of my heroes is John Templeton. He was a pioneer in global international investing. And he started talking about church. He was very spiritual, but he spent hundreds of millions of dollars mixing science and religion or spirituality,
Mhm.
showing that both of them actually could work together. It's not just one way or another. So, um, and that brings me to next, talking about education. Our youth is the environment that they grow up plays a huge role. And you just mentioned very correctly, it's that the kids do not abandon their parents. It's generally it's the parents or it's the environment. So I know you have this great story with the youth program you did in the same community, and you
Mhm.
actually have visited, I think 20 years later. It's a wonderful story because I share that with a lot of my colleagues because they say, it's the proof is in the pudding. That's what it is. So I
Mhm.
love to hear, the story you did with the youth program in
Mhm.
the community. So
Yeah. And before I do that, let me ask you a question. How did that beautiful blanket that's behind you get to California? Like, what's the story behind the blanket, Ramin? Because you have stories too, and you're wearing something really special today too. If you want to
oh,
share,
I'm so honored to wear my
right? So,
medallion.
so
Yes.
how did that happen? You give us your story of where'd you get that stuff anyway?
All right. Well, I had the pleasure of, coming over in July of last year because we've been working on this project. And they said, long distance, again, being in California, it's, it's good to have all this technology, but I really need to be there. And I traveled to Edmonton. And of course, you were gracious enough hosting me. And we started meeting some of the leadership. And one of the great, I mean, I am so honored to have met, Chief, Grand Chief uh, Leonard standing on the road, and it's been a great honor to meet him in person. And he is from Montana Band, and so I came and that started traveling to some of these nations, and I came back in end of April, beginning of May, and we had another visit to some of these bands, and. Of course, it was honored to receive a blanket when I visited Montana Band, and I cherish that. This one was given to me with Dr. Diane Ford, and she was. It was again, it was a beautiful gesture because I didn't expect it, and she shared this with me, and and that was in July of
Mhm.
2023. So that's my story. So the more you, again, that human story is better than any Netflix movies or any traveling or reading books. You actually feel it. And that's what my passion is. I've been blessed that I've had a nice journey in my life, done well in the path that I've had. I've met very wonderful people in all different countries. And it's time to use that experience of like 40 plus years to hopefully make even better changes. And I think this is where my passion is. So, um, and I'm not hoping, I'm believing it's happening, and it will happen, and it will be a great stride. And the question is, again, we have the right group of people together with the
Mhm.
right, I mentioned the compass, the
Mhm.
heart. And that's, once you get that inflection point, you go over that hump, the rest is easy. The momentum
Mhm.
is there. It's just getting there. And
Mhm.
that's where we are. And this is one of the main reasons we're doing this show, to reach out to the communities, telling them we are here, but also they have a support. There are people who are globally, it's not just local, but
Mhm.
globally they are supported. They hear their stories. I have to tell you, in the story, I was in the Middle East, and they knew more about the residential schools. There have been movies there. I've talked to some,
Oh, wow.
different countries than people in the United States. They have no clue. United States, very few people have heard the story. I'm not
Mhm.
sure, of course, in Canada yet, but in the United States. But I'm in, walking on this, and they asked me, "What are you doing?" And I said, I'm really involved. Oh my God, we've watched that movie, or we've watched documentaries, and they are really warm-hearted toward this, and they genuinely want to help. So what I'm trying to say is there is a lot of support globally. The
Mhm.
problem is we got to get the success stories out there too.
Mhm.
There
Mhm.
was the misjustices have been done for the lack of whatever it was, but there is a hope, there is a light, and it will happen. And this is 21st century, and it has to
Right.
happen. So,
Right.
now I
Right.
love to hear about your, the youth
Oh,
program you
yes.
did. I
All
think
right. Well,
that's
back
awesome.
to Elsie Puktuk. The
Yeah.
people there are amazing. But I find wherever I go, people are amazing. But that's just what I see, right? And so while I was there, I just had this one series of workshops, um, 40 of them. That I had really just finished creating those first 40 workshops. And they were broken down into modules of 10 workshops each. So I had had before I ever went there, I had had a client come up to me and say, Lori, have you ever thought about creating a program for youth? Because my 14-year-old son could really use this
Mhm.
information and support. And I said, well, no, I hadn't really thought of it yet. I'm just getting this one out the door. But I could do that because with my background as a teacher, I knew how to build curriculum. So I said, no, but I will. So I did. I created the first 10 workshops for youth, but I hadn't really delivered it anywhere. So while I'm working in the community, I thought, wow, that old saying, if you make it in New York, you can make it anywhere. Didn't Frank Sinatra sing that? But anyway, I thought, wow, if I could get a handful of youth here, I could pilot it. So I decided I would get permission from chief and council. I said, it's not going to cost you anything. I'm here in the community anyway. It's just like when I knocked on Foster's door. I'm in the community anyway. Let's do this. Let's do that. So they said, sure, if you want to reach out to the school and have them put it out there, because the community had a school there. 72 children showed up to pilot this. Now I'm one person. So I told them I'd take care of everything that wouldn't cost them anything. And they said, that's great. And I had to hire about 14 women in the community to help me manage these 72 kids every Wednesday evening. So every Wednesday evening, they would come to the lineup at the school. And here I have a small picture. There's some of the kids there.
Mhm.
And this is Mark. I'll never forget him because we had their workbooks inside these boxes. See, we have boxes made. And it was the month of May, and it was really nice. So they would line up outside of the school, and we'd do the program once a week. Well, the very first night, I had this little tiny 5-year-old. I think she's in the picture here somewhere because I have the bigger. Now, you have to remember, Ramin, these kids had our workshops under their belt 26 years ago. So the mother and daughter who are in the regalia, she was in the mom's program and her daughter was in the children's program. We were having a powwow, so I got that lovely picture of them. But see the boxes?
Yeah.
Now, this little gal, here she is right here. Right here. In the white.
Mm-hmm.
She's in the lineup. She's crying. Oh, Miss Davis. I said, honey, what is wrong? Miss Davis, I want to be in the program. But I had stipulated they had to be 6, 6 to whatever. And she goes, but I'm only 5. And I said, well, when's your birthday? Because I thought, well, she's going to be 6 next month, or, It was yesterday.
Oh.
So I said, that's okay. I don't care. You're in the lineup. You're in. And she was so happy. But you see, this is the advantage of being an independent entrepreneur. You run your show. And I didn't have to, as long as I was professional and whatever, we were doing a good job. So we gave the kids boxes to put the workbooks in because I wanted them to know that it's their life, their journey, and what they had to say in those workbooks was private. Because they were asking us questions like, how do you spell alcohol? How do you spell sexual abuse? And I had another mother come on the playground very angry. And she said, I want to speak to Laurie Davis. So I'm in trouble again. Ramin, I'm always in trouble. Okay. Yeah. So she came up and I said, I'm Laurie Davis. May I help you? And she said, well, yeah. She said, I'm upset. And I said, why? And she said, because I want to know what's in those boxes. I have 3 little girls in the program. I want to know what's in those boxes. I said, well, I told them they're private and they don't have to share them if they don't want to. I said, it's a workbook. That's all that's in there. Oh, well, why don't they want me to look at it? I said, well, they have their reasons and I'm respecting that. I said, but really, what is it that you're really angry about? She said, well, last Easter, we bought each of those girls a very expensive bicycle for Easter gift. And they take better care of those boxes than they take care of those bicycles.
Wow.
And I said, well, that's because their life is in that box.
Yeah.
So fast forward, we did a 5-year follow-up study because the kids would have to leave the community to go to high school in the white community outside. And we did a 5-year follow-up and went to the high school and talked to some of the kids who'd been in the program, but particularly the teachers. So 5 years out, the teachers told us that when the kids came in from the community, they could tell which ones had been in the program.
Wow.
Yeah. They were more respectful, more confident, self-worth was up, good grades, that whole thing. Then we fast forward another 15 years, and I am invited to visit. I'm going to Nova Scotia for 5 weeks, and my friend Jimmy said, hey, I'd love for you to come to the community. We're going to have a special ceremony for his granddaughter who'd passed. I said, I would love to be there. And just the other day, I'm looking up one of my dream encyclopedia, and I'm flipping through, and what do I find? a picture of Jimmy's granddaughter who passed away. She was murdered.
Oh,
And so they're doing a very traditional ceremony. And so, yeah, I said, yeah, I'd love to come for the weekend. So I did. But I got a girlfriend to drive me up, and I couldn't find the highway going into the reserve. Now, I'd been in and out of that place for 2.5 years. Now, you'd think I'd know. No, I didn't know. I didn't recognize it. When I was there 20 years prior, it was a gravel road. All of a sudden, there's a paved road butting up against the main highway, and I'm driving by. I'm looking for a gravel
yeah.
road, right? And there had been an old dilapidated barn. But here I was faced with this paved road. I said, well, this is the highway. Okay. I drive in not very far. There's a shopping mall. There's a gas station. There's a convenience store. There's a pharmacy. Oh, economic development has taken place. And I drive in. I recognize the health center, drive into the town center, drive around the auto shop and gift shop. And I'm thinking, where's Jimmy's place from here? And then I see all these new homes that have been built. Yeah, beautiful. And I finally get to Jimmy's. And Jimmy's got this big new deck on his house. And I said, Jimmy, I couldn't find and all the streets are paved, curbed, sidewalks. This is unheard of. So I'm sitting down. This is the man who taught me how to do business the Indian way, by the way, which is another story, another day.
All right.
And I said, Jimmy, what happened? Well, he said, you know, those kids, because my grandkids were in that lineup of kids. He said, who do you think owns the businesses? Who do you think built the houses? Who do you think lobbied for the paved highways, the paved roads? He said, do we still have some of our problems? Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah, we do. But that generation was impacted by the fact that somewhere along the way, they learned they had value.
Mm-hmm.
And I would say that happened when you came to town. And I said, wow, thank you. And he said, well, thank you. And some of those kids came to see me when I was there that weekend. Of course, they came to the funeral because that was, you know, that generation. And I might mention that after, if people don't know their history around Wounded Knee, there was a prophecy after Wounded Knee that it would take 7 generations to create the generation that would lead the nations to healing. So if you have a child or a grown adult now between the ages of 18 and 35, they are part of that 7th generation. And that's another reason why this is the time, because that generation is busy making a difference themselves. The best way they know how, running for leadership, getting a university degree, working back in their communities. That's been going on for a while. So timing is everything. And that's why now we'll have even more allies within the framework of the communities to do the work that we want to do, because that's who's in the community right now raising their families.
Right.
So that's important to work with our parents. And that brings me to, it's almost an hour I've been talking.
This has been awesome.
So that's, we can do another one of these down the road. But as far as the show goes, we just wanted to introduce ourselves today and put that out there and share it with some of my ambassadors that I have in the communities. And we'll proceed from here, and we're looking forward to having guests. So I'll just turn the mic over to you, Ramin, to close us off for today.
Yes. Wow. What happens to the time? That's amazing. I'm really enjoying this, and I think this definitely will open the path for more discoveries. And I would love to have our guests and learn even more about the culture, but more importantly, the solutions, how we can affect the communities who are in emergency and stress every time that we speak. That should change. That
Mhm.
has to change. There's just
Mhm.
there's so much potential. There's just so many gifts out there that they need to flourish. So, and if you're concerning always in a toxic environment, that will never be.
Mhm.
So we need to see that all the roses, beautiful, beautiful flowers were out there, and they
Mhm.
have to show up. So now
Mhm.
I'm really excited. I can't wait to our next episode, and
Right. Next
definitely have
Friday at
that.
11 o'clock.
Okay, and I will be listening most of that to learn even more. But I just
Yes.
want to tell our audience we are there. They do have support. There is a team, and it's just there is a
Yeah,
lot of light and positive and hope in front of us. So
exactly. So we're coming to town, so
yeah,
get ready. Maybe it'll be your town. Who knows?
yes,
All
absolutely.
right. So bye for now, everyone.
Thank you
And
so much.
thank
Yeah,
you for listening.
thank you. Bye bye.